Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on life cycle approach to plastic pollution management. My name is Apinya Panupat, and I'm from MTech, or the National Metal and Materials Technology Center here in Thailand. And on behalf of the co-organizers of this event, it is our pleasure to have you joining us today. We have an exciting and informative session lined up for you. We will delve into the critical topic of plastic pollution management through the lens of life cycle assessment, or LCA. And this is with the insights of the esteemed experts in the field. This webinar is co-organized by UN Environment Program, or UNEP, and NSTDA, the National Science and Technology Development Agency, or NASDA. Before we begin, I would like to go over a couple of housekeeping items. Today's webinar will be recorded, and the recording will be shared and made available with the participants afterwards. We'll let you know how to access that. And we encourage everyone to actively participate by submitting your questions or comments that you may have during the presentations in the chat box at any time during the presentation, either in English, in Thai, that's fine. Our speakers will be pleased to address as many of your questions as possible during the dedicated Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. And to kick things off, it is my honor to introduce the Deputy Executive Director of MTech, NASDA, Dr. Asira Feungfuchat. Dr. Asira is an expert in polymer and food rheology, active packaging, and plastic circular economy. In her long career with NASDA, she has led numerous research projects, and she serves on the key committees, for example, the ISO Technical Committee on Plastic. And she has been instrumental in driving forward NASDA initiatives on plastic circular economy work, and has recently been serving as advisor for a collaboration effort between the stakeholders in Asia and Pacific. So it is fitting that we have her today, and without further ado, may I invite Dr. Asira to deliver an opening remarks. Please, Dr. Asira.
สวัสดีค่ะ Good afternoon, distinguished guests, colleagues, and participants. On behalf of the National Science and Technology Development Agency, or NSTDA, NASDA, and MTech, the National Metal and Materials Technology Center, I'm delighted to welcome you to our online seminar on life cycle approach to plastic pollution management. We are honored to co-organize this event with the United Nations Environment Program, or UNEP. As we gather today, it is important to recognize the urgency of our topic. Plastic pollution has been a global environmental crisis, and this pollution affects our ecosystem and contribute to chemical hazards, microplastic, and biodiversity loss. Like other regions in Asia Pacific, faces many challenges in managing plastic waste effectively. In our country, Thailand, acknowledge these pressing global issues and advocate for holistic life cycle approach. This is mandated by DINC, or Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee, which is now developing the international legal binding instrument on plastic pollution, especially marine environment. NASDA is proud to serve as technical members representing Thailand in the INC. Our role involves providing scientific expertise to support the committee's objectives. Through our collaboration with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, we aim to contribute to the formulation of effective international policy to address plastic pollution. To deepen our understanding on life cycle approach to plastic pollution, NASDA is privileged to receive UNEP assistance for capacity development. This initiative aims to enhance awareness among governmental and private entities in Thailand regarding to the potential solution and opportunity that life cycle approach offer within international context. I would like to express our appreciation to UNEP Industry and Economy Division, especially Dr. Lawrence Mila E. Canals and his team, for their invaluable guidance and support in the planning of this program. At today's webinar, we are honored to have a lineup of esteemed speakers from UNEP Life Cycle Initiative, DTU in Denmark, and TIAS of MTech. We also have other experts with us among the audience. So I would like to encourage all participants to engage and share their insights and perspective. Thank you for joining us today, and I wish all a fruitful session. Thank you very much. ขอบคุณมากค่ะสวัสดี
นะครับพี่ลืมเปิดไมค์ครับเปิดไมค์ไปไหนนะ
Dr. Vidya, you muted.
Sorry. Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Asira. Thank you for your inspiring words and the opening of the event. And before our first presentation today, may I invite everyone, the speakers and the participants, to have a small photo session together. If you can, please, everyone can turn on the video so our team here can capture the participants, everyone together. Please. Thank you. Okay, please smile to the camera. Yes. Okay, are we doing that? I think that we have many participants, like close to maybe 200. So it'll take my team. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. So I think we have already captured all the participants today. So let me first, for the first presentation today, we have the experts from the United Nations Environment Program. Our first presentation is titled, "What is a life cycle approach and how it is applied in policy to address plastic pollution?" And this will be delivered by Dr. Lawrence himself. And let me take a minute to introduce him as our first speaker. Dr. Lawrence, he leads the life cycle assessment work at the UNEP with close to 30 years of experience in integrating life cycle thinking into global sustainability initiatives. Much of Dr. Lawrence's work focused on informing policies and decision making, including on plastic pollution, to make informed decisions towards the sustainable consumption and production. So everyone, if you be so kind to join me in welcoming Dr. Lawrence. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Phanupat, for this kind introduction. And thank you also, Dr. Phong Phuchat, and apologies if I'm not pronouncing your names correctly. But thank you so much for your insightful opening remarks and obviously for inviting UNEP to join forces with you today in this webinar. So obviously, thank you and thanks everybody for being here. Good afternoon, and hoping that that you will be enjoying this this next hour and a half, well, a bit less now, and getting a lot of insights. So if thanks also for joining for putting the slides already. If we can move to the next one, I'll just introduce very briefly to begin with what the Life Cycle Initiative is. This is a partnership hosted by the United Nations Environment Program, as mentioned, that channels a lot of our work on life cycle assessment. So the idea is that this is a public-private multi-stakeholder partnership that is there to enable the global use of life cycle knowledge in informing decisions, informing policies. I will not stay long here, but the idea is that the Life Cycle Initiative is there to facilitate the application of life cycle knowledge. So we're doing everything from working on the enabling conditions for LCA to be applied better, to also help embed life cycle approaches in specific high impact sectors such as plastics. And the idea of this is that with life cycle approaches, we can get to better decisions and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals faster and more efficiently by focusing on the key hotspots and identifying potential trade-offs. And we will see more of that. So moving to the next slide, we can quickly focus on the matter at hand, so life cycle approaches. And first, you can see in the slide that the life cycle of any product are the consecutive stages for the product to deliver its service, its function. That's always the key focus. We need to look at what function we're trying to provide, what service are we trying to provide to humans. And in order to deliver this function, products require first to extract raw materials, process them into materials that can be used, then going to manufacture, distribution, use of the products, their maintenance sometimes, and finally the end of life, where we can recycle materials or finally dispose of the product if it's a waste. This life cycle approach ensures that we identify the key hotspots because we quantify everything that happens in this life cycle, and then we can identify the key hotspots, environmental hotspots or social or economic, in the production and consumption system. We consider all potential impacts in life cycle approaches. So certainly on climate, so where are the biggest greenhouse gas emissions, but also impacts on ecosystems, on toxicity, human toxicity and ecosystem toxicity, impacts on jobs, impacts on the economy, impacts on biodiversity. And we look at all these impacts that are caused by plastic products or any type of products that we're assessing. And we look at every stage of the life cycle, as mentioned. The idea is that by looking at all these life cycle stages, by looking at all the environmental impacts, we can identify the key drivers of impact and potential trade-offs between life cycle stages, between environmental impacts. And this kind of information can orient a selection of the best solutions for the environment and also with the best socioeconomic implications. So in summary, life cycle approaches are a systems or provide a systems perspective. And to have this systems perspective is crucial to be able to, again, I will repeat, identify the key drivers of impact or the hotspots as we call them, and also identify potential trade-offs between different solutions. So moving on to the next slide, this is essentially about what life cycle assessment is about. And we see that life cycle assessment is an internationally standardized methodology. On the bottom right corner, you see the framework of the International Standards Organization for LCA. And in essence, this methodology helps us or guides our steps in quantifying the environmental pressures related to goods and services. And these pressures are linked to consumption of raw materials that you see represented with these red arrows that go into the system, and all quantifying also all the emissions that go to the environment. So greenhouse gas emissions, volatile organic compounds, toxic substances, or other types of substances. We go through 4 main stages or the standardized phases of LCA. First, we define the goal and scope definition. We define the boundaries of the system, this kind of dashed line that you see around here. We then go through the inventory to quantify all the inputs and outputs, the impact assessment, and finally, the interpretation. And the results of LCA can actually be applied to many, many areas. Actually, let's move to the next slide, because we will see that LCA traditionally was developed to inform decisions at the product level. So if we move to the next slide, please, where you will see that this diagram shows these typical stages in the life cycle of a product as we've seen before. So from raw material extraction, the processing, manufacture of products, etc. Apart from seeing these typical stages in the life cycle, we see that life cycle assessment can help inform design decisions in order to move design to be more environmentally conscious, but also LCA is essential to provide product sustainability information. For instance, the information that guides the awarding of eco-labels or actually the environmental product declarations. It informs then cleaner products and production. And importantly, life cycle assessment does this in a standardized way that makes the decisions in doing these assessments very transparent. And therefore, LCA allows for fair comparisons between alternatives. And this is a key element that we will also see in the next slide. So if we move to the next slide, in a way, we can say that LCA is the science of making things comparable. It's the way to compare things in a like-for-like way. So we can be certain that when we're comparing these products or different alternatives through LCA, the quantification is providing a fair idea. And of course, this then allows to inform the decisions with quantified data that are quantified in a fair way. These science-based comparisons allow for the many applications that we were seeing before. So I will not extend myself there, but here maybe when looking at when we're considering how we're using life cycle assessment to support decisions for plastic pollution, to address plastic pollution, you can think of bans and incentives. So if we're banning products or phasing down products or incentivizing the better alternatives, we need to inform this, what to ban or what to incentivize with life cycle assessment. LCA is also very helpful in informing economic instruments. We're still in the previous slide, if you don't mind. Thank you. So, for instance, if you have an extended producer responsibility scheme with eco-modulated fees, you can inform the eco-modulation of the fees with LCA. It can also inform procurement processes, etc. So I guess let's move to the next slide because we have quite a packed agenda today. And this is mainly to provide you a quick overview that in UNEP, we have been using a life cycle approach in a broad sense, what we call the value chain approach. And the idea here is that life cycle assessment and life cycle approaches are considered in many of these stages on the value chain approach. So first, we're looking at understanding the hotspots that are generating most of the impacts in order to put more emphasis into these critical hotspots. And then assess potential solutions to these hotspots. Again, we need to use LCA to assess and to compare the different actions and then prioritize what actions can yield most positive change. Then provide coordinated and synergistic approaches to push for the right actions in order to achieve the goals, the targets that we collectively decide to achieve. So again, life cycle approach is informing every step of this value chain approach that we use in UNEP to address high impact sectors. So if we now move to the next slide, as mentioned previously, we have environmental impacts that happen in every stage of the life cycle. So here you see kind of in these arrows in the middle, that's kind of the same stages of the life cycle that we were seeing before. And all these bubbles have been generated through consultative processes where we've been identifying potential solutions that specifically for plastics could be applied at each stage of the life cycle, and solutions that sometimes have effects on many of these life cycle stages. And we also link them to the specific actors that are most needed to push for those solutions. So you have solutions in orange, actors in blue, and you see them all along the life cycle. These solutions and actors were identified in a quite big project that we had a few years ago. You see the main report here on your slide, and later on when we share the slides, you will also be able to click and look at that report. That was part of a GEF preparatory project in which we were assessing what a systemic approach to solving plastic pollution could look like. And if you go through the life cycle, you will see we have here well, there's an element of we need to address the production of virgin plastic. So how can we manage that production so there's not so much plastic that is going into the system, so it's easier to handle? How can we increase the recycled content? Again, there's justifications with LCA about that. How can we guide eco-design, sustainable public procurement? You have it in the Insight loop. Eco-labels and standards, we talked about them. Certainly informing finance solutions, et cetera, et cetera. So I will not stop in each one of these solutions, but actually in the next presentations, you will see some particular examples about some of them. So let's move please to the next slide, because I just wanted to talk about an example that when we have addressed or assessed the actions that make most sense, then we also want to galvanize them and providing leadership and awareness. On this, UNEP has joined hands many years ago with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation in the New Plastics Economy Global Commitment that was launched in 2018. And the idea of this commitment was, again, based on a life cycle approach, pick those actions across the life cycle that make the most difference, and then promote these actions across a joint group of actors. And what you see here are the types of actions that we have been asking for each type of actor in the plastics value chain, including governments, of course, as the key actor that sets the rules of the game, but then also looking at producers of polymers, those who use polymers, for instance, in packaging. Packaging is a key focus of the global commitment. Those kind of the retailers, investors as well, and those that work at the end of life in collecting, sorting, and recycling. So these are some of the actions that we have been promoting. But let's move already to the next slide. I mean, the idea is just to provide some hints or ideas of what life cycle approaches can inform. And then importantly, we then identify as well key parameters, key metrics along the life cycle that can help monitor and track what progress we're making. And here you see some of these indicators that are used also in the New Plastics Economy Global Commitment. These are not the only indicators that we could use, but these are some indicators that we've identified as potentially very, very useful. So again, I will not dwell into them, but if you look at the annual report of the New Plastics Economy Global Commitment, you will see results against some of these metrics for each one of the actor that is a signatory of the global commitment. So moving on, almost getting to the end. If we move to the next slide, thank you. These are some of the concluding key elements of what we could say it's a life cycle approach to addressing plastic pollution. And you see the different elements. So we've talked about life cycle approach, providing the scientific basis and the quantitative analysis, which is required to assess progress on the necessary metrics that we are using. The LCA life cycle assessment also allows us to compare the sustainability of alternative solutions, and for all of this, we need to advance on standardized methods, etc. And we will see also, I highlighted here the word toxicity, because again, it's not just about greenhouse gases. We're kind of aware of them. It's not just about plastic waste in the environment, which we see, and that's kind of very visible, but also we see the importance of toxicity, and we'll hear about that particularly today. We'll also see results of LCA of alternative solutions. My colleague Claudia will talk about that in a second. Secondly, we have the national and regional action plans that we hear a lot about when we're talking about plastic pollution. And again, we can inform them better with a life cycle approach through analyzing the hotspots in the plastics value chain. And again, our colleague, Dr. Jiti Munkalasiri, will also be informing us about these approaches applied in Thailand. Thirdly, the hotspots can help setting global and national targets for the most important metrics that we can identify, or KPIs, key performance indicators, all moving towards the shared ambitions. Life cycle approach is also extremely important to inform finance solutions at all levels. And here I mentioned about EPR, so we can inform EPR, eco-modulated fees, but in general, finance decisions can also be taking into account results of LCA to put the money where it makes most sense, for the solutions that really help address the plastic pollution problem. And finally, it's good to build on existing initiatives. I mean, we've talked about the new Plastics Economic Global Commitment. We also have, when addressing plastic pollution, many existing international agreements that can help. So we can build on them and make them stronger as we identify the key drivers of impact. So with that, I will conclude in the last slide. But just before I pass the microphone to my colleague Claudia, who will be talking more about this comparative life cycle assessments of different plastic products, I just wanted to point at the additional resources that are available from the Life Cycle Initiative, from UNEP, about learning more on life cycle approaches, life cycle thinking. All of these modules that you see here on the screen, I mean, actually, they are all available from the same website. And they are all available for free, of course, and they provide a good introduction to life cycle thinking in general, but also life cycle thinking applied both to businesses and also to policy making. So I encourage you all to have a look at them. And with that, I'm not sure if I'm passing it on directly to Claudia or Dr. Phanupat, but thanks so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Lawrence. Yes, thank you so much for your presentation, comprehensive overview, and for the sharing the resources that can be available for our participants to, to make use of in the policy making and in the financial sector, and for the introducing about the UNEP Life Cycle Initiative to us here today. If I can move on to the next speaker. Next, as Lawrence has mentioned, we have Ms. Claudia Giacovalli, and she's the project manager at the UNEP. And Claudia has 14 years of experience in working with the developing countries to address environmental challenges. And with background in development economics and social science, Claudia's work has now focused on bringing the life cycle thinking into UNEP work on plastic and textile sector. And she has extensive experience in project management, in stakeholder engagement, and in strategic oversight. And today she will speak on the topic of LCA studies to compare plastic product options. Without further ado, let's pass this microphone on to Claudia. Please, Claudia. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and good day, everyone. It is really a pleasure to be here with you today. Now, we have had a very good understanding and explanation from Lawrence about what is a life cycle assessment and life cycle thinking. And among yourselves, we have a group from government, so policymakers facing the challenge of having to regulate, having to develop policies, and some of you are from business, also being challenged with how to comply with these policies, what new product to put out there, what alternatives that are out there that are more sustainable. And here today we are going to speak in this session particularly on how LCA, life cycle assessment, can help in comparing alternative options for products and materials, and what have we learned so far about LCA in this kind of comparisons. So we know that, of course, when you see SUP here is the acronym for single-use plastic products. So we know that single-use plastic products are at the moment consumed globally in amounts that are way above the need and way above what we can currently manage. And that's what pushed the debate on plastic pollution. What are the impacts of plastic pollution? You know that at the moment, countries are very, very keen to find a solution to plastic pollution, both in terms of policies that can address the impacts of single-use plastic products. We have seen a proliferation of bans, for example. But most importantly, how can we move away from single-use plastic products and find alternatives that are reusable, that are more environmentally sustainable, for example? So the question for us today is, how can we assess the overall impacts of single-use plastic products to inform decision-making, whether that decision-making is with the government, so policy decision-making, or with businesses, so business decision-making. And we can go to the next slide. And to answer this question, so how can we assess the environmental impacts of single-use plastic products and decide on good alternatives? So LCA is really a useful tool to assess single-use plastic products versus alternatives and give us a sense of where to opt, what to opt towards. Life cycle assessment, why is that? First of all, before I give you the answer, is really why is LCA so helpful in this sense? We have heard from Laurence that what is the advantage of using LCA is the fact that through this tool, we can really look at the whole life cycle of a product system. So from raw material extraction to production and manufacturing to the logistics and distribution, the use and the life cycle, the end of life. So this is basically the disposal of a product when it's no longer in use. And the beauty of it is that when you look at the impact through this life cycle of a product, you don't miss out on impact that might happen in one stage and pass off the burden to another. And through that comparison, you also can do a fair comparison because you are using a standardized methods that basically compares apples with apples rather than having comparison that are not fair and that lead to, for example, greenwashing, etc. The other element is also super important is that through a life cycle approach, you also don't only evaluate or assess one environmental impact. We have seen a lot, for example, of carbon footprint. So climate change is particularly visible. So there is a tendency to only assess climate change impact, for example. With an LCA, a good LCA will identify environmental impact that go beyond that. So you will have a range of environmental impact that are assessed. And most importantly, it helps you to prioritize alternatives, avoiding regrettable substitution. What is it, regrettable substitution? So if we go to the next slide, what we mean by regrettable substitution is really whenever we are faced with a conundrum, we have a problematic product or a problematic material and we need to replace it because we know this is hazardous or it's too environmentally impactful, etc. Whenever we replace that problematic material with another material, substance or product for which we have unknown or unforeseen impacts, but it turns out in the end, after a couple of years, for example, we discovered that this has very bad impacts, for example. So that is a regrettable substitution, replacing a material with an unknown or foreseen product, material, or substance that it turns out to have hazardous impact, for example. This happen often, for example, has happened in the past with specific chemicals or when substituting a fossil fuel-based product with bio-based plastics, etc. And we'll hear a bit more of an example later on, particularly with specific on chemicals. The other advantage, so going back to why it's important to use an LCA approach, is because when we look at the science, and LCA is a scientific-based method, we find out that in the end, usual assumptions don't always hold through because we need to consider a lot of other elements. For example, shifting from a single-use plastic product to a single-use paper product, which could seem very intuitive if our objective is to end plastic pollution. From an environmental perspective and from LCA perspective, it's not necessarily obvious. Okay, going to the next slide. So the UN Environment Assembly, which is the biggest environmental body that governs UNEP, has asked already since 2019, has encouraged member states and governments, basically, to tackle plastic pollution generated by single-use plastic products. And UNEP, through the Life Cycle Initiative, has been gathering information on LCA-based and providing LCA-based recommendation to provide guidance to policymakers and to other actors on how to interpret results from comparative LCA on single-use plastic products. Here, the timeline that you can see is basically a collection of all the LCA meta studies. So we have been comparing results from all the LCA studies that have been published and that are available out there to draw conclusion based on LCA on what products are better between single-use options and reusable alternatives and other single-use alternatives as well. So we have looked at shopping bags, we have looked at plastic bottles, takeaway food containers, beverage cup, tableware, nappies. We have looked at menstrual product, face masks, and food packages. So there is a very big array of products, of single-use plastic products that we have considered and drawn recommendation for this. And I thank you so much for also pointing participants in the chat towards the link where all this material can be found. Going to the next one, I want to draw focus a little bit on some examples, for example, on tableware, and we'll see later on a few other single-use plastic products. So this is tableware, the normal tableware that you would find in sit-down cafeteria, hospitals, schools, or in flight. You will find bowls. Basically, the normal tableware that we would use is plate, cutlery, and the food tray that you would find in a takeaway store or in the airplanes, for example. What the LCA studies have been telling us is that in all catering contexts, hospitals, schools, hotels, reusable tableware has a much lower environmental impact than single-use option. So it's not the single-use nature of the product, but it's not the material that is the issue. So whether you are, and that goes back to the point that I was making earlier, it's not about single-use paper or single-use plastic product, but it was the single use. So it's not the material, but it's the single use nature of the product that is the issue here. So LCA has been telling us, in fact, shifting to reusable products is a much better option for the environment. And what we have seen in terms of the life cycle stages for disposable tableware, the raw material extraction and the manufacturing phase are the ones that, together with the end-of-life waste treatment, are in fact the 3 stages of the life cycle of these products that impact the most on the environment. And when it comes to reusable tableware instead, the phase that is the most environmentally impactful and where we need to be most careful is the use phase. So how we wash our reusable tableware. So making sure that we wash with lukewarm water if we do by hand, or by washing machine if we have efficient washing machine, etc. So in this case, consumers and users have a big job in terms of making sure that we wash efficiently to reduce the environmental impact of the use phase. Let's look at another example of water bottles. So water bottle is a very interesting example, because what we have found looking at all the LCA meta studies that are published out there and trying to consolidate a little bit the conclusion that we could draw, we have seen that in fact using boiled tap water or purified water that is available through dispenser is a much better option than having any type of bottled water, in fact, from an environmental perspective. When we look at alternatives then, so tap water basically wins. If we can guarantee safe tap water or safe dispenser for water, that is the preferred option. And then if we look at the reusable alternatives, glass or steel seem to be the preferred alternative based on life cycle assessments. And if we really have no other choice and we are looking at disposable alternatives, so the single-use alternatives, then in some context, the carton box seems to be preferable to to the plastic bottle. Though I need to emphasize the fact that this is really the last resort. So the first two scenarios that are presented, the fact that tap water or purified water available through dispenser and reusable glass, reusable or returnable, this is also another option to purchase reusable metal bottles that you maintain for yourself, or ensuring that there is a system of returnable glass water bottle is also a very good alternative. As a last resort, when you are comparing disposable alternatives, then in that case, the carton box could turn out, depending on the context, to be an okay option compared to the plastic bottle. Now let's move to another product that we have compared. So this is the shopping bags. Shopping bags, nowadays we see much less of them around because they've been already subjected to a lot of bans, a lot of regulations. What I want to show you here is the fact that what are the key factors that determine the impacts, the environmental impacts of plastic bags in general. And these are basically the material type, the weight. So depending on the country, you might have different weight of the bags. And this is actually very important when you're conducting an LCA. The number of type a bag is used and reused. For example, a single-use bag, you might turn out to be actually reused several times compared to a cloth bag that sometimes we just have several of them and do not use. So the main purpose here is to always be conscious also of how we use the product. So not just how we make the product, but also to sensitize how products are being used and washed and reused as many times as possible. Because every time we reuse a product, we would have basically utilized a certain amount of natural resources to make that product. Every time we reuse that product, we reduce the environmental impact more and more and more because the product made is always the same one. And finally, the other key determining factor of impacts for shopping bags would be the technology and the material and energy use. So different countries would have a different energy source. For example, if countries have renewable energy production systems, it would be completely different scenario. If in a country there is absolutely no reusable energy source, for example. And finally, the waste management process, same thing. In countries, depending on what is the disposal system in a country, the assessment, the LCA assessment result will completely change depending on if bags are being landfilled or incinerated or recycled after the end of life. Let's move to the next one. So basically, what is the recommendation that we can have here? Just two quick high-level recommendation. Banning single-use plastic product is adequate in some circumstances, but should always be combined also with the promotion of the best alternative, which, based on life cycle studies that we have consolidated so far, the reusable option turns out to be the better option for the environment. And it's not, as I was saying, it's not about choosing, banning, or prescribing specific materials or product, but it's also important to change the consumer behavior. So push for increased reuse rate and avoid littering. And all in all, if we move to the final, I believe the next one will be my final slide. As I was mentioning, whenever it comes to reusable alternatives, so we are saying the best option is to reuse, purchase less, try to reuse more, but which means that the way we use and reuse this material and product will be extremely important. So consumer choices do matter and consumer behavior does matter. So we need to make sure that that consumers are educated in the best way to use and reuse the product. So the most important thing we can do to address plastic pollution is consume less and choose to reuse. Many thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, Claudia. Thank you for sharing the demonstration, the example, which demonstrate really clearly how LCA tools can be used to, compare them during the use phase and throughout the whole life cycle. Thank you so much, Claudia. So I think we may be a little bit behind the schedule, but so let's move on to our next speaker. Before that, let me share that I think we have about 270 registrations to join this event, and I think we now have about nearly 200 people here joining us today. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to write in Thai or in English in the chat box, and we would really like to hear your thoughts and maybe your perspective and the information that you would like to know more. This will help us, to plan for the next event or any other things that can follow today's webinar. So now to the next speaker, on to our next speaker, Dr. Pachari Mankong. And Dr. Pachari is she holds a PhD degree in environmental and water resource engineering from Mahidol University here in Thailand. But currently she's worked as the postdoctoral researcher at DTU in Denmark, the Technical University of Denmark. And her research focused on developing the methods and applying the life cycle assessment, toxicity modeling, and chemical substitution of agri-food system. And today, Dr. Pachari will present on the topic around like avoiding regrettable substitutions with an LCR tools called UseTox. Dr. Pachari, thank you so much for joining us today. So the floor is yours, please.
Thank you so much for your introduction. I'm so glad to be here today. And I'm going to introduce the practical examples of how LCA is used in assessing regrettable substitution with UseTox. Moving to the next slide. I would like to briefly talk about the UseTox background, which is scientific consensus model. The model is developed by the large team of international scientists in the chemical impact modeling and endorsed by the UNEP Life Cycle Initiative since 2015. The figures show you the UseTox framework. It covers two main impact categories, ecotoxicity and human toxicity. The UseTox combines two different factors to link environmental phase, exposures, and toxicity effects. And currently, UseTox provides the toxicity factors for over 10,000 chemicals found in 500 different product applications. So UseTox has been used by the government, industry, scientists to assess the human toxicity and ecotoxicity of chemical over the entire life cycle products. And UseTox can also be applied in the different decision support tools, such as chemical substitutions and life cycle assessment. Moving to the next slide. Talking about the applications of UseTox. UseTox originally developed to use in life cycle assessment. So look at the figures. The figures show you each chemical has its own life cycle. When the chemical used in the product is entered to wider product life cycle. So UseTox show the unique way of the impact quantifications. UseTox considers not only the chemical emission from the different processes, but UseTox also consider the chemical in the product or the product used. And many studies have shown that the chemical in the product or the product used dominate human toxicity. So from the results, it's important to consider toxicity-related impact to avoid the burden shifting of results or in decision-making based on the life cycle assessment. Moving to the next slide. talking about more applications of UseTalk. UseTalk can be also applied in the chemical substitutions to identify and replace chemical of concern in different product applications. And currently, UseTalk can be used to evaluate the chemicals that are directly emitted to indoor and outdoor environment, chemical used in the cosmetic or personal care, chemical in children toy, building materials, indoor paint, food contact materials, and also can use to quantify impact from the pesticide application in field crop. So right now, UseTalk was already applied to identify over 100 of chemical of concern in children toy, and it's already included in the regulatory RIC. UseTalk already used to identify 55 chemical of high concern in building materials, used to identify 34 chemicals in indoor paints. And in the future, UseTalk constantly developed and expanded to include more product applications such as textiles and electronics. The next slide. I would like to give an examples of real case study applying UseTalk to identify alternative to DEHP in flooring. DEHP is the persistent toxic plasticizers in vinyl flooring materials, and its use or contain around 20% of the material mass. So DEHP is well known of chemical of concern and phased out in most products in Europe. So the team of Dr. Peter Fankers compare difference of chemical alternative to DEHP, and the study identified two alternatives. Look at the figures. You can see that two alternatives are safer than DEHP, specifically in reducing human toxicity and ecotoxicity. And the study also considered the climate change impact. It's because DEHP has high contribution in the material mass, so small change in DEHP can cause big difference in climate change. So that's why the study considered climate change. However, from the result, two alternatives didn't show how much in reducing the impact, because two alternatives have similar structure to DEHP. So it means the supply chain of chemical are similar. However, based on the results, it's important to consider all impact and whole life cycle to avoid the regrettable substitution. The last slide. In this slide, I would like to give an overview of the UseTalk technical documentations, where you can find additional details of the modeling framework, and also UseTalk application in the context of chemical substitution and prioritizing setting of the chemicals. So many studies have listed here. For further questions or query, you may contact me or Dr. Peter Fankers from the UseTalk team, who is also the audience today. Thank you so much for today.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Patri. I think the tools UseTalk might be of interest to many of our participants. From the today we have participants from government organization, from research and development, from academics, and also nearly 100 people from the private sector, from different industry in Thailand, ranging from like electrical, electronics, and chemical. So I think that will be of interest to them on this the application or the access to for this tool. Thank you so much.
All questions are welcome. You can see my email.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the context there. Thank you. So now we move on to the last presentation session. This will be co-presented by our very own Dr. Chitti from TIIS here at MTech and NASDA, and also from Miss Claudia as well. But I believe that Dr. Chitti will be speaking first. So let me give a brief introduction to our speaker, Dr. Chitti, and he is currently working here at NASDA with TIS, Technology and Informatics Institute for Sustainability, TIIS. And Dr. Chitti, he earned his PhD in France in material science, and his research background is in the combination of materials, chemistry, and environment, and he has been engaged in the life cycle assessment at NASDA since he joined NASDA back then. And he played an important role with his team in the development of Thailand's National Life Cycle Inventory database. And his work now focuses on data for sustainability, on low carbon society and competitiveness, and with the emphasis in international collaboration. And in 2020, Dr. Chitti represents Thailand as one of the steering committee for the UNEP Life Cycle Initiative. So please welcome Dr. Chitti, and later on Ms. Claudia for their presentation. And the topic would be the examples of the LCA use to inform plastic policy. Thank you very much. Dr. Chitti, please.
Thank you very much, Pinya. So thank you, everyone. I will thank you, the UN Environment Life Cycle Initiative Technologies University of Denmark, for being here with us, with Thai partners, and I do believe that this is maybe the first time that we organize such kind of topic in Southeast Asia countries. We are here today with the UN for sure, with a very serious topic on the plastic pollution. But to start my part, I'd like to mention the pathway that Thailand ran through the almost in a 4 decades. Actually, I do believe that Thailand we start the LCA or life cycle thinking for almost 30, 40 years. At the beginnings in the year 90s, we start with a small project. We have the clean label that start in 1994. This is the first in Southeast Asia countries. 10 years later, we start the capacity building in the year 2022, and we got a very big project with the Japanese government that developed the database for Thailand. And this time we have 5 organizations work together with its ministries of industries, MTech, the Thailand Mental Institute, TRF, and the Federation of Thai Industries. So we try to build data for LCA. Then 2 years after, we have the first project of the inventories in the year 2009. If you can remember, maybe I'm a little bit old. 2009 is the first year that we start the carbon footprint of products. And I think it's the first countries in Southeast Asia as well that release our own environmental the carbon footprint on products and organizations. And after we have the level of the carbon footprint, we have many things that come later, such as the LCN network, the water footprint with the Federation of Thai Industries, the product environmental footprint from the European Union. And then I think around 2015 or something like that, we'll start on the data on the sustainability. It's the same year that SDG just released from United Nations. There are many things that happened back then. We have the global LCA database, we have the review of LCA database, and Thailand represent more and more in international activities. And also right now, we have a unit that produces the data for Thailand. We also promote, I think Thailand really promote the carbon neutralities and net zeros, sustainabilities, sustainable consumption productions, eco-efficiencies, even ESG. So everything that relates to this topic use the data and use the LCT concept. So I think we have a very long journey for Thailand, and somehow we still have a room to improve. So today, thank you so much again, our partners, colleagues. We have a long way to run in the plastic pollution. Next slide, please. In Thailand, normally we apply the LCT LCA in policy in many aspects. This is an example that we run in Thailand. You may very familiar with the carbon footprint, which is our product or organization of the carbon reduction label. So it's quite common. You may heard the water footprint from the Federation of Thai Industries. You may heard the green GDPs of Ministry of Industries, the eco efficiencies from the State Enterprise Policy Office and the Ministry of Finance, or you may be familiar with the clean public procurement, which is employ the idea of LCA as well. So I would like to mention that Thailand engaged in LCA and we apply LCA in the real policy application. And then I think nowadays when we are go through many business sectors, and right now today I think we try to focus on plastic. Even you are the plastic producers, users, or waste management. And I would like to say that in this topic, UN has a lot of activity on that. So next slide, please. I'm not sure that you're familiar with this, but there are guidance which called the National Guidance for Plastic Pollution, Hotspotting and Shaping Action. This report was released by UN Environment, IUCN, and for sure with the support from the Swedish International Development Cooperation agencies. They make a report for Thailand. So, but somehow the consultation or consultant is Quantis and the EA, but they have a very good result for Thai and try to look for the whole supply chain in terms of plastic and for sure recommendation for a better situation of Thailand as well. Next slide, please. A summary of the plastic of Thailand. According to the report, they mentioned that 70% of plastic was collected. Somehow, a 58% is mismanaged rate, and in the 58%, only 9% is domestic recycling rate. So it's very low compared to the plastic that we collect. How about the leakage? After the report, they mentioned that Thailand leakage in the year 2020 is around 336 kilotons of plastic, or if you divide that by the capita, it's around 4.8 kilograms per capita leakage of the plastic. And if you look on the hotspot of the plastic of Thailand, the most critical polymers that we have to tackle is LDPE, HDPE, polyesters, and synthetic rubbers. So these four polymers is the most critical in terms of the plastic pollution for Thailand context. Somehow, if you're focused on their stage, there are many states that this report show some difficulty in Thailand, whether it's come from waste generations, waste segregation, waste collection, the leakage while waiting for collection, the waste related behaviors, or the waste management infrastructure. So this is the point that the consultant see in these countries. And they mentioned also that the 18 of 77 provinces in Thailand responsible for 50% of plastic waste leakage. Okay, so it's a huge amount that we have to manage. Next slide, please. About the leakage of plastic, there are a pathway as well. If you look from the mass of the plastic waste, it could be a land source of the plastic waste, and from the land source, they go to collect and uncollected plastic. If you go to collected plastic, it's divided into waste management, whether it's collected for recycling, the properly disposed or improperly disposed. And if you look for the uncollected, this is uncollected, okay? And then for the leakage, it's the leakage from the mismanaged plastic. And this is just a small amount compared to the whole amount of the plastic that we collect. Next slide, please. Okay. After we looked at the whole picture of Thailand, they make the material flow analysis, and they are just also mentioned that we are a countries that producing waste for recycling, and also we are import a lot of plastic waste as well. And one thing that important here is that they're pointing out is the waste imported is larger than the recycling capacities. It's mean that we import too much, and actually, internally in the countries, we can recycle only 9%. And a big number here is 90% of the waste is not recycled. Can you go to next slide, please? So in the brief for the risk report, they just try to point out what is the leaking, where is leaking, why is leaking. And if you see properly here, they just mention which type of the polymers that leak, which is LDPE, HDPE, polyester, synthetic rubbers. From application, normally it's come from the bag for sure. It's come from snack, the food packagings, the tray, the box, the baby diapers, or the cigarette filters. So this is the main source of the plastic waste that we have. But if you're focused on the sectors, they point out on the packaging, textile, automotive tire, fishing, medicals, and agriculture. And more than that, if you look on the map of the Thailand, they can point out as well that this is the leak from which province, which magnitude, and also you can see the shoreline of Thailand. This is the green line. It represents the leakage from the fishing activity of Thailand. After you know what is leaking or why it's leaking, you can ask about why it's leaking. So there are many explanations on that, whether it's common waste generation, waste segregation, waste collection, waste management, or the post-leak management. And they put some color as well. The red is a negative impact, but the green one is very good positive contribution. I don't have a time to explain the whole report, but I would like to mention that in terms of their UN environment, they work on many countries, and Thailand is one of target as well. And I think it's very good opportunities to see the report. And if we can see the link of the report on the chat box. Thank you so much, Lawrence. And I think it could be all for me. And I would like to say that life cycle thinking is very good starting point for Thailand. And now we try focusing on plastic pollution and help everyone to make a better world. We try to make a better environment for the whole world. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, GT. That's a very, very rich explanation, and it's wonderful to see how much of LCA has already been included in policy decision and in actions in Thailand. So it's with that. As GT was saying, Thailand is your country, is one of the countries that is already doing fantastic work, and the government is
Sorry,
very, very keen.
Can you turn on your video camera, please? Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. I didn't realize
good,
my
thank you.
camera was off. I was saying it's Thailand is one of the countries, but is doing already fantastic job in integrating LCA in policy decision making, and I will walk you through just some other examples of other countries that are, for example, considering and trying to use LCA to drive market changes. We can already go to the next slide. Just before I go into the example, a reminder basically, why are we integrating LCA in life cycle, in decision making, is to really make sure that we inform decision based on science and to ensure that we consider all the environmental impacts that are generated by plastic and plastic products. And ultimately, this will help us promote more sustainable production and consumption patterns. So if we look at another country that has been incorporating LCA in various ways, in fact, in the way they are deciding things, and we go to the next slide, this is Mexico. Mexico has been in Latin America. Mexico has been incorporating LCA into their plastic policies and action in various ways. So one is through the regulatory framework and policies they have issued. One is through, for example, their waste management prevention law. And basically in that policy, they use LCA to evaluate the environmental impacts of products through their life cycle. in standards that they have issued. For example, they make sure that they apply LCA so that products, including plastic, meet certain environmental performance criteria. They also are very strong on promoting circular economy, whether it's through emphasizing the importance, for example, of designing products for longevity, recyclability, minimal environmental impact. And LCA is a critical tool to help in this approach because you can assess through LCA, you can basically assess the full environmental footprint of plastic products and identify where to focus actions to actually make improvements. And also companies are always encouraged to conduct LCA for their products to reduce their product environmental footprints. Going forward, other ways that Mexico is incorporating LCA is, of course, strengthening their capacity in applying LCA. So they are running educational product, they are programs, they are running capacity building initiative, and have a very strong network of LCA practitioners to make sure that life cycle thinking is really embedded at every stage, from students' curriculum to all the way into the governments, basically. And of course, they're also active, very active international cooperation, because they also interact in international forums. They are part of the global commitment that Laurence presented at the very beginning of the workshop. They are active in the negotiations of the Global Plastic Treaty, and that calls for a life cycle approach to plastic pollution. And they are active also, they have a network that connects very closely to the life cycle initiative, same as for Thailand. If we look at another, now we change continent and we go to Africa, and we look at the South African example. South Africa has been trying to use life cycle assessment to define how to eco-modulate fees in EPR regulation. Now, the LCA is already a mandatory requirement in South Africa in the EPR regulation. What does it mean? Eco-modulated fee. In fact, these are fees that producer pay, and depending on the environmental characteristics of their products, so they can pay more or less fees. That's why they're called eco-modulated. So products that, for example, are easier to recycle, or that contain fewer hazardous substances, etc., that have a longer lifespan, producers of those type of products may incur in lower fees. Vice versa, producers that have a lower life cycle, that are difficult to recycle, that contain harmful material, this type of producers for those products pay higher fees. So the idea is excellent. Eco-modulated fee that are driven by LCA can help address, basically through LCA, they can define whether good or bad product, how badly a product is performing, for example, or how well a product is performing, and in fact can really help improve the product design, the material minimization, identify what are the hotspots. So using LCA studies, companies can really help themselves in paying less in an EPR system, for example. Let's go to the next slide, please. The problem that they have now incurred in South Africa is that the regulation is excellent. They put mandatory requirement for LCAs, and companies are encouraged to run LCAs on their product. But at the moment in the country, there is still very much lack of capacity for LCA expertise. They don't have enough guidance to standardize the practices, and also at the level of the granularity that is required. So there are a lot of steps that still need to be taken into consideration, and these are really, really helpful lessons learned that, for example, other countries that wish to take a similar approach to use LCA for eco-modulated fee in EPR regulations can take to avoid replicating the same mistakes. At the moment, their scientific council is advising the government on how to put in place guidelines, and we hope that they can find a way to move forward and to continue with this approach, because the base is very, very good and can become an excellent example also globally. Here, I won't go into the detail, but you have received the slide deck. These are other example of regulations from the EU and the US that, for example, have been using the LCA in their policy making. Is just to say that it's an incredible useful tool to basically base policies on scientific ground. So that's somehow it's our key message that I would like to reiterate and I would like to close with. Thank you very much and happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Claudia. Thank you very much, Dr. Chitty, for sharing the the situation, the work, the status in some of the countries around the world, some case examples, and also for Thailand as well. I think now we have all of the presentation presented, and now we have reached the Q&A portion of the webinar. I haven't received any. Yeah, sorry. I have two questions in my direct to me, and I can read that later. But perhaps I can let the audience know that if you have any questions or comments, can you please raise your hand, and then my team will unmute the microphone for you, and you can ask the question directly to our speakers, please. Maybe we can take 30 seconds to see if there's any hands raised.
While we wait for question, if you don't mind, Dr. Phanupat, I would like to mention something. We have an event actually happening in Thailand from 18 to 20th of September. It's called the Sea of Solutions 2024, and the theme is delivering actions to end plastic pollution. It will take place at the UN compound in Bangkok, and we will drop the link in the chat. Registration is currently open. The program is very interesting and is already publicly available on the website. If people are interested to join, that would be another opportunity to learn and network and just exchange with other like-minded people from the Southeast Asia region.
Okay, thank you very much. That's very useful. And yes, please log in onto the website for the event, Sea of Solution, right? To see this schedule, the program, and how can you register and join. I believe it's on site at the UN ESCAP Conference Center in Bangkok, right? I'm not quite sure is there any options to join online, but perhaps you can have a look there on the website. Thank you. As we don't have, I can't see any, sorry. Oh, chat. Okay, sorry, here's a chat. Okay, sorry. Let me have a look. Okay. Oh, okay. We have a question from I think from policy. The NESDC, the National Economics and Social Development Council, to the panelists. The question is, I was wondering, when there is a leakage to the ocean, does the LCA take care of that leakage into the ocean? Yes, Rollins, please.
Yes, I was just thinking I can quickly respond to that. So that's a very good question, because indeed, so life cycle assessment, as we've been saying, is, well, we can say it clearly, it's the best tool to assess environmental impacts of products and services, but it still does not address absolutely everything. Having said this, actually, there have been very, very recent developments to incorporate the impacts of plastics in the marine environment. and that's also through a project that has been promoted by the Life Cycle Initiative, which is called MARILCA, so Marine Impacts in LCA. We will shortly share the link as well in the chat. But factors for emissions of plastic waste into the marine environment and how this plastic impacts life in the marine environment have been incorporated, have been published in life cycle assessments. It's still very new, so we're still addressing and checking how these impacts are being addressed. We are also publishing very shortly, if they have not been published already, impacts as well in other ecosystems. So plastic pollution in terrestrial and aquatic, so freshwater ecosystems. So the science is catching up, and we are expanding life cycle assessment to consider as well the impacts on nature loss from this plastic pollution. But it hasn't been done until very, very recently. So I think we published some of the first case studies. Claudia, you will remember that. I think it was in 2022. That was one of the first case studies using these factors. But we're still advancing, but good question.
All right, thank you, Lawrence. Next, from another participant, Kun Varun Waranyanon. Sorry if I say your name not correct. The question is, thank you for the comprehensive presentation. I would like to ask whether there are LCA comparisons between single-use aluminum, water cans, and other types of packaging. Yes, that's the question.
Thank you. I will try to respond, and please, colleagues, complement. I'm not aware of a comparison of an LCA comparing the aluminium water can with other type of packaging. I will have to check and revert, but I don't know whether, Laurence, you have come across one.
It's a good question, because there's actually many comparisons of aluminium cans for different beverages compared to other types of materials for packaging beverages. But it's true that actually bottling water in aluminum cans is relatively recent. So I'm not sure if specifically for water, I've seen examples. We've seen actually many comparisons. And again, it's one of these areas where linked to some of the studies that Claudia was presenting, any single-use option can be, I mean, depending on what other alternatives you have out there, would be superseded or would be improved by a reusable option. Again, for water, that's the kind of thing we're talking about. If you have access to potable, to drinkable water, or to water that can be filtered by reverse osmosis in bulk and then provide it, in bulk, then that's always the better option. If we're talking about comparing different single-use alternatives, well, aluminum cans are one of them. The results will then depend, well, are these aluminum cans being recycled as well in your geography? Because that really determines the environmental impacts later on. Will that then be better than plastic or than any other type of single-use packaging? Well, it will need to be seen, but probably you will have some results that can guide you in the meta study that Claudia talked about, even if no specific study on aluminum cans for water was probably available by the time we did that study.
And Varun, if behind your question is the fact that you are perhaps working in the water packaging space and you are planning to do an LCA study comparing such products, please do share with us the results. We always encourage to publish the results of such LCA studies, because that's what makes it helpful, in fact, to have those comparisons done. Thank you.
Right, thank you. I see a comment or maybe point for discussion from Jitik here. Can you expand on that? On like how about the link between LCA and INC?
Shall I have a go?
Okay.
Yes, please.
Oh, so Well, that's a very good question, GT. But of course, anything that happens in the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee will depend on the members. So the members of the INC. The request, the resolution that requested the work of the INC expressed that life cycle approaches were in the scope, that the scope of the treaty is the full life cycle of plastic. But actually life cycle assessment was not mentioned there specifically. I think from the presentation today, it is clear that life cycle assessment and other life cycle approaches can help in many of the decisions that need to be supported by the international legally binding instrument that the INC is negotiating. But whether this will be addressed or not, it depends on the negotiators, of course, and it depends on how they bring it in. I believe that there are some references in the current draft, which is still, kind of the basis for the continuation of the negotiations. But Claudia, I think, yes, please, you can complement.
Thanks. I just wanted to reinforce the fact that the resolution itself, the resolution that was agreed at UNEA 5, in fact, speaks clearly and gives the possibility to member states to do work along the full life cycle of plastics. And if I read the text that I have in front of me, it says that the members decide that the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee is to develop an international legally binding instrument on plastic pollution, including in the marine environment, which could include both binding and voluntary approaches based on a comprehensive approach that addresses the full life cycle of plastic. So the original resolution that gives the setting for the INC to work on plastic pollution has that in. And as Laurence was mentioning, it's really up to the member states that are the owner of the process to decide how to interpret that and how to materialize it in the text that is being negotiated.
Right. Thank you, Claudia, and thank you, Laurence. I see raised hand here from the participant, Dr. Shabir Jivala. Can we turn on his microphone and please fire away your question, please, Dr. Shabir.
Thank you very much. Thanks to all the speakers also for a very interesting presentation. I enjoyed it very much. The thing is, when we compare between single-use and recyclable or single-use and reuse, the decision is quite clear. The numbers may vary in different studies, but generally single-use will not be better. But one point about single-use, sometimes in some cases, is that it's just so much more convenient, and this item, this convenience is kind of difficult to include in the assessment, wouldn't you say? Or do you have something to quantify that as well? Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Dr. Jivala. And sorry, I just jumped in, but maybe also others want to jump in. I would say, so no, convenience is not something that can be objectively assessed in life cycle assessment. I would remind everybody, however, that, well, it depends on the countries. In some places 10 years ago or 20 years ago, in some places 50 years ago, this kind of convenience of the single use had to be taught. My parents' generation, who lived through the Second World War and the Spanish Civil War, they could not throw things away. They were not taught for throwing things away. So it was not convenient to throw single-use items because in their minds it couldn't happen. They actually had to be taught that you have to throw this away. You're not going to be able to reuse it because that's the way we've decided. We can unteach these things and we can also make things more convenient. So of course, we have to think of not putting the onus on the consumers that, to use the reusable options, but we can make it easier for them. And once it becomes a habit, it's not inconvenient at all. So I think we also have to be very careful with, the truths or the facts that we've taken for granted that, oh, throwing things away is more convenient. Well, not necessarily. If in our minds that resource becomes valuable, it's not convenient to throw it away. So I'm just putting that there. But indeed, from a technical perspective, yes, in LCA, you have to assume that the different solutions that you're assessing are delivering the same function. But it's not possible really to measure this convenience. At least that's my opinion. I don't know if others want to chip in, but I see there's quite a lot of other questions and we're running out of time.
Yes, I think we can perhaps go to, perhaps as we're running out of time, to the last question from Kun Jutamani Machamadon, and her two questions are: what are the different concepts between LCA under ISO 14044 versus the use talk model? And another question is, can we use the use talk model to assess the LCA of product and then easily get certification of such ISO? So yeah, I think Professor Peter Funke has written some comments or answer to this question, but if Dr. Pachari or anyone would like to answer or comment on that, please do.
First, I would like to clarify. UseTalk was developed to. First, we originally developed UseTalk to use in LCA, but the concept are different with the general LCA. Is UseTalk quantify the direct impact of the chemical used in the products and direct emitted to the environment. This is much more that we get direct impact from UseTalk. So for the general LCA, they consider the supply chain mainly. Many different processes from the resource until the end of life. Yeah. So then when you want to apply LCA, that's why I mentioned that you should consider all impact relevance. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pachari, for that answer and clarification. So as we are running a little bit out of time, I think we'll what we will do, and we'll take all the questions and maybe get back to you later on. Maybe a couple of questions that cannot be answered right now, but we'll get back to you. And at the end of this webinar, after the closing, my team will show the feedback survey, and we have two sections. One section is about the question, and for you to write the comment about the core content of this seminar. If you have question, please post it in that feedback survey there. And yeah, now we would like to come to the conclusion of this webinar, and I would like to invite Dr. Lawrence from UNEP and Dr. Chitti to say a few words to close today's webinar, and maybe share some reflections that you may have. Thank you.
Lawrence, after you.
Thank you so much, GT, and thanks again for this invitation. So on behalf of UNEP, I would really very much want to show the appreciation for this opportunity to share the resources that UNEP has been working on for many years to better apply life cycle approaches towards sustainable consumption and production. And in particular, in the last years, applying life cycle approaches to address plastic pollution. This has been a request by member states. Claudia mentioned in the recent resolution, but even before, member states have been asking, for instance, UNEP to provide the materials on comparing single-use plastic products with their alternatives using life cycle assessment. So the results of those studies also were a request of member states, and it's always great to then be asked to share, to participate, and to provide these resources and to make them more available. We look forward to continuing working with you and to continuing with the support. Next to the side-by-side to the event that Claudia mentioned, we're already planning to continue with the support in September. So with several of the Thai stakeholders, and obviously we'll be very much eager to continue on this engagement. So again, thank you so much for the attention and all the super active participation. And over to you, GT.
Right. Thank you so much, Lawrence. I will be short, and I would like to say that Thailand is a very active country. We are engaged a lot in the plastic pollution. For this time, we just send a flyers, and we have 300 participants that register, so it's quite surprised us and UN as well. So I would like to say we have to move together from public sectors, private sectors, academics, and I think everyone try to make a better environmental condition for Thailand. So I would like to thank you again, and like Robin just said that there are the next activity as well in September, and hope you join us for sure. And thank you again for Lawrence, Claudius, Peter Fankers, Dr. Bashiris. Thank you so much for your contribution, and Dr. Pinya as well for the organization. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. So
Thank you so
please,
much.
yeah, thank you everyone. So please return your feedback in the form. We'll be so thankful. Thank you and goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a good day.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.